This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by New Hampshire Liberty News as of September 11th, 2020. Again, this is a podcast version of the Ridley Report, guaranteed to last over 20 minutes, so you can listen in your car or while you're eating. Well, I should say it's supposed to last over 20 minutes. Mistakes happen. Anyway, I have begun reaching out to well-off people with tech interest, not necessarily people I know, not necessarily people in New Hampshire, about an organization that I have discovered. And I have become such a believer in this organization that it has the best chance of doing the most good in the world over the next 10, 20 years of any organization. I've begun just sort of shilling them on my own. They don't know me, I don't know them, except from reading about them and reading what they've got to say. I just begun reaching out to people and encouraging them to donate to this organization that I have nothing to do with otherwise. So this organization is called the Future of Humanity Institute. And actually, so far, this isn't very New Hampshire related, but it will be in a sec. So this is an organization that, strangely enough, it's an academic organization, and they do receive some government funding, a lot of private funding. Elon Musk is one of the donors. They're run by Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom, who's also a computer scientist, which is a fairly good combination, I think. It's good. The more of a generalist you are, the better. Bostrom's job is to spot threats to human survival, existential threats, the kind of thing that could wipe out civilization, not necessarily cause extinction of humans, and propose solutions, pathways through the problem. I read his book, Superintelligence, which he wrote around, I think he may have written this may have been roughly a 2015 book. It's not super recent, but I was blown away by it. Some of it I didn't understand, some of it I forgot. I didn't read it, as a textbook. I listened to it as an audiobook, but I went through the whole thing twice. And he goes through all of the different things that could go wrong, even though he is an optimist and he favors pushing forward on this in a calculated and least risky possible manner. He doesn't seem to be a libertarian per se. He seems to be mostly non-ideological, but where there is ideology, he actually probably falls closer to the Swedish model, something you would expect someone from Sweden to think. And that means he's much more, tolerant of government spending than I would be. But we do have to look at the world and what has worked and what hasn't. And the thing that has worked the least badly in the world so far is the Scandinavian model. That's the best place to be if you're in the world in terms of, not being killed and stuff. Maybe not so great if you factor in the danger of invasion. But anyway, it's hard to argue very strongly against something that has worked relatively well. Just because I can imagine things that would work better, and I'm pretty sure they would, a degree of deference is indicated. Anyway, the first person I've reached out to, I've composed this message for Bruce Fenton, a New Hampshire millionaire, maybe a billionaire, but I don't know. He's considered a Bitcoin whale. And he moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, so he's part of our endeavor. We've swapped emails a time or two before, but I don't know him. I don't expect much from this conversation. I expect I'll need to reach out to many people before anyone donates a significant amount of money to the Institute. And I donated, before reaching out to anyone, I made sure I donated to the Institute. I sent them $30, even though I'm a cheap bastard who can't really afford to spend $30 on this. I thought it was important to set an example, to do something that I almost never do. I don't think that I can't even remember the last time I donated money to anything. I'm fairly impoverished, but since I don't really spend money either, it kind of works out. What I have to give is my time, to some extent. I can put time into this. So I wrote, quote, Bruce, as the prospect of an artificial intelligence singularity becomes an increasingly likely source of humanity's doom or salvation, I've begun an effort to pull my weight on the issue. I'd like to invite you to join me. So far, this has taken the form of publicizing the institution, which seems to have the best chance of easing humanity toward a positive AGI outcome. That organization is the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, led by the brilliant Swedish futurist philosopher Nick Bostrom. Elon Musk and other imperfect but successful luminaries have begun donating to it. Although I am a cheap bastard, so have I. There aren't many folks who are more purist libertarian than you, so possibly you'll be skeptical initially of the donor list and of an organization that is partly government funded. But so was I once. Bostrom's books, interactions, and speeches have made a reluctant believer out of me. I can't name any other person who has made more impressive progress gaming this thing out, identifying so many dangers, and setting the world's sights on a safe and hopeful path. I'm all ears if you know of something or someone who is working on this and is more libertarian, but Bostrom is probably the key. He's establishment enough to make things happen, but humanitarian enough to make those things freedom-friendly. To what extent do you think the Institute, or Bostrom, would be an appropriate target for Finton donation? I can make podcasts, talk radio calls, and crappy little gifts all year without moving things much, but you're a different story. You've already hit on the Free State and crypto cylinders. The other big cylinder coming around the bend is this one. And I don't see another human on the planet more likely to save the solar system and relative freedom over the next 40 years. If it were me in your shoes, I'd dump this into my MP3 player and give it a listen. Unquote. And at that point, I list the two parts of Nick Bostrom's audiobook, Superintelligence, which you can find on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type Nick Bostrom Superintelligence. Then I directed him to the Oxford University's donation page. And I continue my letter. Quote, those are the steps I took and don't regret. If you were to take them or come up with something better, it could literally be world-saving. If you do make a donation to them, I'd like to publicize it. On a related note, if you can assign someone to put me on a mailing list to keep me up to date on interesting things you guys are doing related to NH Freedom or NH Biz, I will probably call NH Talk Radio about it. Free publicity, it's what I have to give. I make about 200 of these calls a year, but I've only made about 4 calls to advertise your activities over there. It's for lack of info. I'm not seeing much on brucefenton.com or blockchainnh.com that looks newsworthy in this context. Best, Dave Ridley, ridleyreport.com, Winchester. Unquote. So I just recently sent that to him, and he hasn't really probably hasn't had a chance to write back yet if he found this to be interesting. I've always thought, if you're shilling yourself, no one, that's just hearsay. But, if you're shilling someone that you don't work for, you're making you can make a stronger case. Now, you may know of someone or something who's better than Nick Bostrom on this, but tell me about it in the comments section or email me or something. A lot of times it's not people who are ideologically pure who save the most lives or allow the most people to rise out of poverty, right? I mean, Deng Xiaoping was not the best person to ever walk the face of the earth by any stretch of the imagination. And yet, while he was in the saddle in China, his modest reforms probably saved more lives than anyone else ever has, except for some of the people who were involved in preventing nuclear wars. I guess there was a submarine captain, during the Cuban Missile Crisis on the Soviet side who voted no on a nuclear launch when two of the other voting members on his crew voted yes. So if he had voted yes, I guess that would have probably resulted in the incineration of 30 or 40 million people. But, it's possible that Xiaoping actually saved more lives than that, because of the massive numbers of people we're dealing with in China. So just by steering humanity toward the least risky possible destinations, especially if more and more people are listening to Bostrom, it's certainly possible that someone with a much more benign ideology could save even more lives than Xiaoping did. Oh, and going back to Bruce Fenton, for those of you who don't know, he moved to New Hampshire as a free stater, person who moves to New Hampshire for more freedom, part of the Free State Project. I guess he moved to Portsmouth, and he did start some sort of it seemed like a business incubator or park or something like that. I don't know the details. And he has run a Bitcoin conference in New Hampshire at least once, maybe twice. Well, I say I like to be able to publicize their activities over there a little bit more than I do. I mean, I just don't know much about what's going on, and I don't see much on the relevant websites that I've looked at. Maybe I should look harder. But, most of the other existential threats we can think of, other than nuclear war, which is fairly likely, probably at least a 20 or 30% chance over the next 100 years, most of the other threats just pale against AGI, which again I don't view as automatically a threat. It's only a threat if we get it wrong. There's also a large possibility that it could be the best thing that ever happened to humanity, and that it eliminates all the other threats. And that's one of the things that Bostrom points out, is even though AGI might be the most dangerous of all the different things coming around the bend, it's so powerful that it makes biotech and nanotech problems go away, or reduces them dramatically. I'm not sure how it would make nuclear war threat go away, but I bet it could tell me. So this is just, the chances of a comet hitting the Earth soon are pretty small. Global warming, I'm open-minded, could be a big deal, but we pretty much know what's going on with computers and the rate of increase and the dates on which we will achieve certain dangerous milestones based on not Moore's law, but that thing that's like Moore's law, the doubling of computing power every 18 months for IT power. If we get this one right, we may not ever need to get anything right again. So, despite my traditional hyper-focus on New Hampshire, I feel that I need to go off mission a little bit and do something about this. And again, you may think of something better, and I'm sure going to listen. So, other New Hampshire news. Carla Garett is reporting that she has won her primary. She is continuing her perennial attempts to win the New Hampshire Senate seat in Manchester. She is a free stater and libertarian who's wisely been running on the Republican ticket against Lou D'Alessandro, the perennial incumbent. He's actually a very transparent guy. He's considered a constitutional threat by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. His voting record is abysmal, but he'll always stop and answer your questions in a civilized and carefree but professional manner when you ambush interview him with a camera. Easy to like, hard to support. So it was apparently a very close primary race. I don't remember who she was running against, but she just barely won her primary. One of the interesting things is, she's been doing this since, I think, 2014. So, every 2 years. And it's interesting, it's a reminder of what a good pick New Hampshire was for the Free State Project, because despite the fact that she's basically a pure libertarian, there's no controversy that I've ever picked up on in the Republican Party about her. It feels like she's just accepted right in, and maybe someone runs against her, but, this would be scandalous if she was doing this in Idaho or something, probably. The Republican Party would crap a pyramid there. But, this is New Hampshire, the state where the Republican Party actually is the the party that's more libertarian than the Democrat Party and can actually seize power now and then. Well, actually about 50% of the time, so that's nice. And it's not like she's secret, right? She may be a little, sometimes she may parse things a little bit in favor of the Republican Party more than I might, but she's not being coy or secretive about her libertarian and free stater thing that she's got going. I mean, she was president of the Free State Project. Other news from Vince Perfetto posting on Facebook, quote, "For over a decade, Free State activists have been pushing back against government indoctrination centers in New Hampshire. For more info on New Hampshire's education options, fsp.org/education." Okay, so he's just sort of making a comment on a news article. Quote, "Largely thanks to the work of two very active Free Staters, Jody and Ian Underwood, Croydon, New Hampshire has been at the center of several victories for education," unquote. That was from Bill Allman. I need to find the article that they're talking about. Okay, so the article is on InsideSources.com. A quote, "The Griffin family of Croydon, New Hampshire, Dennis, Catherine, and their 12-year-old grandson from Clayton, is taking its fight for school choice and religious liberty to the state's courts," unquote. So that's part of the article. I'm really getting this out of order. The headline for the article is this, quote, "Croydon family files lawsuit challenging religious discrimination in town tuition program," unquote. Now, continuing to quote the article, quote, "It's a move that could strike down the unconstitutional exclusion of religious schools from New Hampshire's town tuition programs. That would benefit families across the state by expanding education options available to them and ending discrimination against a faith-based education preference. Because Croydon is too small to have a middle school, it pays students tuition at private or public schools. But the Griffins are being denied tuition because they chose Mount Royal Academy, a Catholic school. New Hampshire prohibits so-called tuitioning towns from paying tuition to religious schools." This case is important because in June, the United States Supreme Court made it clear that it is unconstitutional for states to exclude religious schools from educational choice programs solely because they are religious. Institute for Justice Senior Attorney Tim Keller, one of the lawyers representing the family, told NH Journal. That is exactly what New Hampshire is doing by excluding religious education options from the state's town tuition system. It's not fair that the Griffins' neighbors receive tuition to the school of their choice, but the Griffins are denied the same benefit just because they've chosen a religious school for their grandson. By singling out religious schools, and only religious schools, for discrimination, New Hampshire violates the U.S. Constitution, Keller said. Thanks to those recent SCOTUS rulings, this could be a short fight. In light of the Trinity Lutheran and Espinoza decisions, I have asked the Attorney General's office to review our programs to ensure they comply with the law and treat all non-public schools equally regardless of religious affiliation, New Hampshire Education Commissioner Frank Edelblue told NH Journal, unquote. So maybe this is an article from NH Journal that's been reprinted on Inside Sources, but anyway, I guess that would be nhjournal.com. Anyway, continuing the article, quote, "This isn't just a win for religious liberty, it's welcome news for families and kids in search of better education choices. Some argue such exclusions are a pillar of secularism and preserve the separation of church and state by preventing public monies from going to religious organizations. However, this is misguided. School choice programs allocate education funds to parents who then spend them at their school of choice. The same principle allows Pell Grant scholarships to be spent at religiously affiliated universities and Medicaid payments to be spent at hospitals organized by religious organizations," unquote. So that's an excerpt from the NH Journal article and or Inside Sources article. So I'm not sure exactly what the Free Stater role in all this was. I don't know if that family was Free Staters. But Croydon and Jody Underwood have been good sources of news over the last 6 years or so in New Hampshire, as I call talk radio. They're always fighting some good fight. Jody is frequently on the school board. Maybe she's been on the school board that whole time. I think she may have actually been at the top of the school board once for a while, like chair of the school board or something like that. In Croydon, which I believe is near Grafton, which is near nothing in particular. Or maybe it's close to Claremont. I forget. Gubernatorial candidate Nobody, the former Rich Paul, who changed his name to Nobody, has lost his primary challenge bid against authoritarian New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a somewhat authoritarian Republican. He's not all bad. I don't know what kind of vote totals he got. There was another primary challenger, Karen Testerman, who's not a liberty-friendly person on all issues, but she made the best primary challenge she could against the governor. It was a pretty serious challenge where she was mainly taking him on over his lockdowns. She's a reopener. And a long-time figure in the Republican Party. I've, seen her doing quite a bit of stuff over the years, more of a mainstream Republican. But she does challenge him on this issue and probably is more pro-freedom than him on other issues. She's probably just more of a conservative than him. And I guess she got 10% of the vote against Sununu in the election. I don't think Rich Paul did all that well, but I don't know what his vote totals were. I shouldn't even say that he didn't do all that well, because I really don't know enough to say one way or another. I just know that I haven't been hearing much about it. You'd hear somebody crowing about it if he'd gotten 10%. Anyway, he posts on nhexit.com, or on our Facebook group, something that is unrelated to that. I guess he had a census encounter this month. So he says, quote, "Encounter today. Edited for clarity and brevity. Census Lady, can I ask you some questions? Nobody. The Constitution authorizes you to enumerate the residents here. On my side, there are 2. Census Lady, can I ask if they were male or female? Nobody. You may ask, but I will not answer. The Constitution does not authorize you to gather demographic information. This is important. When FDR decided to lock the Japanese up, how do you think he found them? The census. Census Lady. Okay. Nobody. May I ask if the institution you represent looked more like the one described in the Constitution, that you would have received a very different welcome here. Nothing personal." Unquote. So, I'm glad he's active on NHExit. I'm glad he posted this. I'm glad he didn't answer those questions, but I wish he'd gotten video. Actually, during the last census, 2010, I think a Free Stater took over the census collection process, and he was managing all the census workers. So they were very nice. And there were videos of them being very respectful to homeowners. Other news, unrelated. Post by Leah Cushman on Facebook. Quote, "I was not allowed in the building to watch the vote count without a mask last night in Deering. They would not compromise and allow me to sit 20 feet away from the poll workers inside. However, they allowed me to sit 5 feet further away on the other side of a screen window because reasons." Unquote. This is sort of significant because I believe Cushman works in the medical field. I think she may be a nurse. She had a run for state rep. She is running for state rep this year. I don't know if she won her primary or not. She probably did. Add her to the list of people who are pretty high up in the medical industry, but skeptical about some of the restrictions that are being imposed on people. She is also a reopener. She is very active on the reopennh.com Facebook group. Dan Hines, who I believe is a Free Stater, but definitely a liberty lawyer and liberty activist in New Hampshire, posts this about the election, the primary election. Quote, "I lost my race for county attorney. Thank you for everyone who supported me. Congratulations to John Coughlin, who has always treated myself and others fairly. He's fairly experienced and will make a great county attorney once he wins the general election. I did win my race for delegate to the state convention, which is either good or bad, depending on how the GOP decides to act," unquote. That's pretty generous on his part. I can't imagine an establishment sitting county attorney anywhere in this state that deserves such high praise. Certainly there are some of them who are better than others, and I haven't heard anything bad about this guy, but county attorneys. It would have been a real coup if Dan Hines could have gotten that. But give it time. Bristol Police Department has apparently posted a picture of refuse that has appeared at a park, a pile of trash, and I think they are the ones who said this, quote, "This is why we can't have nice things, and one of the reasons why Profile Falls is closed. If you recognize this person's trash, please let us know so we can return it," unquote. Well, okay, sure, people shouldn't be dropping trash, but you know what else? Police departments should not be shutting down parks. Unless maybe the trash is made of radioactive yellow cake or something. I paid for that park. I need to be able to visit it whenever I choose, whether there's some paper on the ground or not. And this stuff would not be happening if the government were not restricting so many of our other activities. There is a reason why people are going to parks. It's because for a while they were allowed to, while so much else was banned. Look, these people, the BPD is the arsonist and the fireman. So are all these police departments that are shutting down parks, while also trying to keep people from doing other things, which led them to the parks. Will someone please unfuck the world? They've closed a road somewhere else in New Hampshire that leads toward a park. They have, or rather a trailhead. I don't know if it's still closed. There was a park, they've closed a park in Merrimack. Too many people enjoying the park. But there is pushback. Here's an article from unionleader.com, excerpt. Quote, "Opposition is mounting against a proposal to implement even more stringent face mask requirements in Nashua, with an aldermanic panel set to review a proposed amendment to the city's existing face mask ordinance on Thursday. Several residents are speaking out against the recommendation. The new proposal, if adopted by aldermen, states that no business and no employee of any business shall provide goods or services to any person not complying with face mask requirements. No business and no employee of any business shall permit a person to remain on its premises in violation of these requirements." Catherine Norton, owner of Norton's Classic Cafe in downtown Nashua, said in a written statement to city officials that after having to shut down her business for 3 months and reopen at half capacity with other restrictions, she may now be required to police mask wearing. "No," Norton wrote regarding enforcing masks, "and I will work with my family that lives and owns property in New Hampshire and all of the contacts I know to vote out anyone who votes that we do. Enough is enough." In his statement, Travis Tripoli of Nashua argued that the newest proposals take away the freedom of a business owner to operate their business how they see fit, unquote. So anyway, there's already a mask restriction. That's not enough. And, controlling these detailed decisions of a business, turning the businessmen into policemen, state-controlled capitalism is called fascism. Having said that, I have raided City Hall in Nashua during its meetings to ambush interview their politicians, and I have found it to be one of the most transparent, open, comfortable environments that I've been in. I think of all the New Hampshire cities, it's the best. no assaults on my camera, no one trying to stop me from filming, very few people refusing to answer my questions. It seemed like there, in my experience, has been traditionally a good give and take there. But it doesn't mean they're not fascists on this issue. And I just still don't know where all these towns are getting their power. Supposedly everything they do has to be authorized in state statute. I don't know what state statute authorizes them to do all this mask stuff at the town level, or I should say municipal level. That's what I have for now. RidleyReport.com.
Driving in circles around Central Keene, I hurl both insults, angry and mean, against the activists from Free Keene, who wander around thinking as though they were free, and even though they aren't hurting me, I will hate them hatefully, urging their appearance in the penitentiary, although that expense would be charged to me. I'm starting to feel somewhat confusedly.